Hello, BookTube. I have a mail haul for you, a kind of miscellaneous kind, not new books mostly. The other day I was on Twitter picking fights with strangers, as one does, I received the rather strong suggestion that I go to the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, buy some books, and then haul them on camera. I don't want to disappoint, so I did exactly that. And uh, the first one I got is a hardcover of Dominic Green's The Double Life of Dr. Lopez. I only before this had a UK paperback that was convenient for size, but it couldn't be read. You couldn't read it. It was too small. I couldn't read it. Not comfortably, anyway. And this is pretty. It's very nice. It's the story of a scandal in Elizabethan England. In 1593, the Earl of Essex accused Rodrigo Lopez, the personal physician to Queen Elizabeth I, of being a spy and, I don't know, a cannibal or an extraterrestrial or any number of other things. Lopez had a relatively uneventful history of service to the crown and also relatively conventional double service to the crown. But he wasn't any of the things that Essex said he was, and yet the Queen had different people to appease and let Lopez go to the dogs. She let him stand trial, she let him be convicted, and he was hanged, drawn, and quartered. An absolutely horrific fate, just horrific. If you don't know what it is, I'm not going to describe it on BookTube, but believe me, when you Google it, you will not get the full import of how bad it was. And the man didn't deserve it in any way, and this is a big, sumptuous, full-length historical account of that. So I was very happy. I long since got rid of my little UK trade paperback, so I was very happy to find this because I do want the book. And then the next thing, another hardcover, something that I had a trade paperback for. Once upon a time, I had a UK trade paperback that was extra tall and extra thick, had that poor quality paper that somehow is endearing, and I really wish that I still had that, but I'm perfectly happy to take a hardcover, a U.S. hardcover. This is The War Against Clich by Martin Amis, whose fiction I find utterly insufferable. But his nonfiction just glows in the dark. It's fantastic. I remember reading this book when it first came out, from start to finish. Oh, when was this? This was 2001. And I was happy to have it, even though I had already read most of the pieces. I followed him. I followed him in periodical literature when he was doing book reviews and author appreciations and that sort of thing. And then the book is gone, went away, and now it's back. I was very happy to find it. I have, as you may remember from my library tours, I have a big bookcase full of collections of reviews by authors. It's the hometown team. This is one of my favorites. He's a very sharp writer in that regard. And then the next one is sort of similar. Sort of parts of it along similar lines. This is Writing Home by Alan Bennett. This also I had in a lime green, small, compact UK trade paperback ages ago. Read that lots. I read it until it was creased and folded all over the place. And there are parts of it that I think are incredibly self-congratulatory. I've always found this author to be a little bit less of the adorable national treasure than he's billed to be. But incredibly insightful, incredibly intelligent. And there are large chunks in here that are just the same thing as the Martin Amis. They are literary reviews and author appreciations. And I remember them being wonderful. So this has a lot of other stuff too. And I will, now that I have this, a nice solid book, it'll actually go on the same bookshelf as the Martin Amis. Now that I have it, I will just reread it all. And then we have some history, of course. What would this book all be without history? First one is also a collection of magazine pieces. This is American Sketches by Walter Isaacson, the great biographer Walter Isaacson. And this is just pieces that he wrote for various magazines. Little bits and pieces here and there about the news of the day or a political operative of the moment, with a few more historical things thrown in. But I confess, the main draw for me will be the essays on Ronald Reagan. And I don't have it. I don't think I read it when it first came out. This was during my Open Letters tenure. 2009. I don't think I ever read it. I thought when I first saw it, I thought, well, you've read a lot of these pieces in their original magazines, and besides, didn't they seem a little slight? But when I found it, basically for free, I'm not going to turn it down. I'll definitely reread it. And then a modern military history classic, part of a trilogy. This is the first book in the trilogy. This is An Army at Dawn by Rick Atkinson, and it is the story of late 1942, 1943, beginning part of 1944, the real beginnings of the trial by fire of the U.S. armed forces in World War II, where you take this unprepared and at first under supplied army that really has no institutional memory, or not much of one, of large-scale military encounters, and you throw it into the maw of this conflict, in this book in particular in North Africa, against veteran, battle-hardened German troops, the very best that the theater of war had to offer, and they get mowed down and they get knocked all around and slapped silly, and so do their allies from England. And the great thing about this book and the two books that follow it is that they are a learning curve. They are an evolutionary study of an army learning to be great through hard experience and through lots and lots of careful study. So it's a narrative history of the North Africa campaign, but it's also something larger, something very, very involving. And I have the third volume, The Guns at Last Light, and now I have the second volume, which means I only need to find a nice hardcover of the middle volume, which is The War in Sicily. It will turn up at the Brattle, I'm sure. And then the next two, I did not get at the Brattle. The next two I got in the mail. You might have seen, I put pictures of it online because I was just squealishly giddy. Two graphic novels from DC Comics, from the wonderful folks at DC Comics. First one is Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, Volume 1. This fantastic Mike Grell cover, repurposed for the graphic novel. And this is, despite the fact that it says Volume 1, it's a little more opportunistic than that. This is not the first appearance of the Legion of Superheroes back in the 1950s. This futuristic superhero team it's set in the 31st century, and it's composed of teenagers, and Superboy, Superman when he was a teenager, time travels 1,000 years into the future in order to be part of the team. And they fight all sorts of villains and enemy forces in the 30th and then the 31st century. And the Legion appeared as just a bit thing, just a toss-off idea, and it caught on and developed a fandom of its own that is rabidly loyal. I am the foremost member of that fandom. We are not happy, of course, Legion fans are not happy that the Legion currently has no comic book. There is no Legion of Superheroes in DC right now, which is just scandalous, absolutely scandalous. The current DC Comics is doing poorly by its oldest superhero team and its future superhero team. There is no Justice Society of America, the very first superhero team, and there is no Legion of Superheroes, the future team, and that drives me nuts. But this, despite the name, Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes Volume 1, it's more opportunistic than that. It's not the first appearances of the Legion. It's instead the editors picking and choosing some really great stories from 40 years ago. I noticed that some really good artists have been picked. Some really iconic storylines have been picked without any real regard to chronology. So I don't know what Volume 2 will look like, but I was very happy to get this. And then this Megillah takes us right back to the same time as An Army at Dawn, the early 1940s, when America was in the war and was starting to worry about the size of what they had undertaken. And that reflected itself in the comic books. This is Superman. The Golden Age Superman, Omnibus number 4, in which this was in the early 40s. Superman was shipping out to comics were shipping out to servicemen in Europe and selling by the bushel, and you can see that in these stories, not only in the fact that Superman slowly but surely gets more powerful as time goes on. Even in just one volume, he gets more physically powerful as time goes on. But also in the levity of the stories. These stories are clearly meant to take your mind off your troubles. There's very little that's somber about them at all. Instead, they're meant to be funny. And Superman is not played as a buffoon, but he is often the straight man of the story for a wide cast of outlandish guest characters. Everybody from the god Mercury to Paul Bunyan. These are the stories. The 40s are the time when Superman transitions out of full-blown fable and into science fiction character, a grounded, internally consistent science fiction character. But I love the transition time. And I had no idea I would get this. Good Lord. I was fully prepared to spend $120 on this thing. Instead, DC Comics sent it to me. So I had to show it to you. That and the Legion thing are just, they were the highlight of my bookish week so far. And there you go. That is just an impromptu book haul for you. Some more titles to horrify your TBR. And I'll wrap it up here, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.